Welcome to the In-Tune Guitar Academy. Today we have a special guest, Darren Michael Boyd.
I was that guy a lot of times, waiting, going, man, if I had a record deal, or if I had, you always wait for these things, and it's like, now that's why darrenboyd.com, the website, even exists, because I started that for my various music projects to put in, and the whole video process. I mean, when I started making these videos, I had no idea. I didn't know if I could do it or anything. I just said, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to figure it out. And like, it's pretty crappy. Like each, they get progressively better, I think, I hope. I've made some mistakes, a lot of mistakes, but that's how you get better. And
exactly, as long as you learn from the mistakes.
Yeah, and it's not.
The worst is editing. I find shooting is one thing. That actually putting it together into a cohesive story. But
of course, what's funny is like, nobody knows this, but you're here setting all this stuff up yourself, and like scrambling to get everything done in time and everything. And so when I'm shooting videos, it's like I'm everything. I'm the guy who's setting the laptop up and setting the cameras up and the lighting and the music gear and catering. Like, I'm doing everything, lugging all the stuff up the stairs or whatever. And so by the time the videos start, I'm like, I look like I've just come back from the gym, and I'm like, oh man,
it's a lot of work.
I have to be on screen now.
Not late.
Yeah, no, that's it. And so there are times where there's a video I shot. It was my second video I shot in this room for a song called Little Toad. And it's hilarious because you can't see, but there's a couch over there, and a lot of it was shot around that couch. And I have this little Fender amp, tiny little thing you could like carry in a backpack. And it's a visual thing because it's like I'm just plugged into this little amp, and it's kind of meant to look sort of funny. But at the same time, there was a thought process of like, I've got a lot of stuff I have to bring. I'm just going to bring this light little amp. So sometimes be creative.
I have a little tiny Hughes and Kettner. It looks like a head, just like your orange
head.
It's about a tenth of the size, and it's a DI plug-in, or you can plug it into a certain size speaker. And I love it because it weighs less than a lunchbox. They call it a lunchbox amp.
Portable, yeah. And I know my Marshall head that I don't have here today, the GCM 800, I think it weighs more than this 212 cabinet. I mean, lifting that thing is like, yeah.
So tell me about your progression from learning to play guitar, and then did you go into, when you were in high school, did you have gigs? Did you form bands?
Yeah.
How was that progression from there to becoming more of a professional musician?
Well, I mean, I started off almost being professional, as weird as it sounds. I mean, of course, there were some little jam bands and stuff that, we never knew full songs or anything. But when I switched to playing guitar, that's when it became, I found friends from school who are mostly still like best friends to me today. And we had a band going, and it was like, we were real serious. We had our lunch hours, our evenings, we were rehearsing and writing songs, and honestly, I think the guitar was a means to an end. For me, it was all about writing songs, and I had to do it with something. And it just happens that I love the guitar enough to sort of become, good enough that, and I don't consider myself like I'm no virtuoso or anything like that, but became good enough that I could play in other people's bands and stuff. But for me, it's always been about writing songs. And when we were teenagers, and we were playing, we weren't even old enough to be in the places, and we started playing opening gigs for like, Killer Dwarfs, and trying to think of who else, like a lot of the stars of the day that were, I can't even think, XYZ was one of them, Lee Aaron, we did a lot of shows with, Helix, and all these bands that were coming through playing Barrymore's, that was the place to play back then.
Barrymore's was a great...
Yeah, it was something, yeah. And of course, again, we were kids, and we were learning all this stuff. And by the time we were, I think, 18, we had our first tour, and we were touring across Canada We had 2 buses, school buses, full production, and we had a stage set that we built, with ramps and everything. Because keeping in mind, this was the generation of MTV, or Much Music in our case. So we watched Poison and Motley Crue and all these bands, and instead of going, we have to compete with our other local high school band, we were like, we have to do that. So we wanted to,
So you set your heights higher than...
Yeah, and we ended up being in like Metal Edge magazine a little bit and stuff like that. I mean, there was no stardom there, but we were living the dream or the nightmare, depending on how you look at it, right? Who was it? I heard Rick Emmett say it, but he was quoting somebody else, and he said about being a musician, and sorry, I don't remember who it was, but if you want to be a musician, don't do it because it's the worst life. If you have to be a musician, then do it because it's the best life. And it makes sense. There's a lot of sacrifice and everything. And I mean, I'm not chasing the dream of rock stardom as I may have been when I was 18. I really don't care. I'm just happy to just keep playing music and
that's what it's all about. And that's the reason why I have this YouTube channel and my website. I just want to promote the guitar as means of communication, as a hobby, as a way of getting together with people. And just to recap, in case you don't know the names that were said, Rick Emmett, famous guitar player, singer for the Canadian rock band Triumph, a very famous band. And Lee Aaron, she was from Brampton. Actually, one of my friends went to high school with her. So
no way. Yeah. Well, a little bit later on, after that tour, we ended up doing some touring with her. That was the Body Rock tour, I think, where she was like really hit.
Oh, right. She had a really couple of good hits, 1983, 1984, around there. Metal Queen, that's the song I remember the most in Body Rock. Yeah, and John, who was the guitar player, him and I talked a lot about songwriting and stuff, and now he's in Nashville, has a music recording studio there, and does photography and that. Yeah, so Helix was another band, famous early '80s Canadian. I wouldn't say heavy metal, but hard rock, kind of like the Scorpions. I wouldn't call them heavy metal, but just more of a rock edge.
Yeah, hard rock makes sense. Yeah, and that's a lot of what I grew up on. I mean, in the '80s. Again, when I was a kid, we called it metal. We called Poison metal, because it was hair metal or whatever they call it. I don't even know if that term was being used then. It was glam metal, I think.
It's, I think, kind of a derogatory term.
I never liked it because I thought, how does that relate to the music? I mean, lots of bands who play different kinds of metal have hair. It doesn't.
Willie Nelson had long hair.
Yeah, exactly. But in any case, we kind of called it metal. I find it fascinating how there's sort of an evolution, right? So when you think about Shout at the Devil, for example, from Motley Crue, their second album, a lot of people go, well, Motley Crue are metal, like that was... But when you hear that album and you put it up against, Blizzard of Oz, for example, like, how are you going to tell me that Ozzy is not heavy metal? Of course he's heavy metal. That's what he, So you take those 2 albums, and Shout at the Devil is probably heavier or as heavy.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So
then you have nowadays you watch a hockey game on TV and you can hear Crazy Train over and over.
Over and over.
It becomes part of the mainstream. Back when we were younger, it's like.
That's
my
true.
parents hated that stuff. Yeah.
Well, I saw an interview where I think it was Marilyn Manson, because he had. He was the Antichrist superstar, right? Everybody was like, it was just, he was scaring moms across the world, right? And Dee Snider from Twisted Sister was telling him, like, just enjoy it now, because now you're like the public enemy #1. Later on, it'll be like, remember that song, Beautiful People? What a nice song that was. Because Twisted Sister, like, were, people were like, what was the name of there was a...
We're Not Going to Take It?
Well, We're Not Going to Take It, but there was a group of a bunch of political wives and stuff had this whole...
Tipper Gore. She was
Tipper Gore,
She was the wife of Al Gore, and they had a movement against all these bands, and they were the ones that put the warning
parental advisor, which was the best thing they ever did for the band.
It's awesome. If I was a band, I'd put more bad words into my songs to get more people to buy it.
I actually keep thinking I should put a parental advisory sticker on even though my music is instrumental, I should still put that sticker on there because maybe it'll sell more. But Yeah, so like Twisted Sister and Wasp and all them, they were just like, yeah, they were people, everyone was against, well, not everyone, but those people were.
I remember in the early 80s there was record burnings. There were people who used to say, if you play Stairway to Heaven backwards, it's satanic. Some kind of satanic message. Yeah. Whereas Jimmy Page was actually into the occult. He was into Aleister Crowley and all that kind of stuff. So he didn't really have to play anything backwards to.
Well, yeah, it's like Venom or one of those bands. Yeah. It's like they're not really hiding it, you know.
No, Venom is probably one of the heaviest bands I've heard. Yeah. Them and Slayer. Yeah,
Slayer was, I think, the loudest concert I ever went to. And it sounded great. That was the weird thing, is that it was very clear, but it was like loud.
Yeah, you feel it crushing against your chest.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's amazing that I still have hearing from. Well, I don't think it's this. I think it's the cymbals.
That's I remember hearing Dave Grohl on radio. He was talking on Sirius XM, saying that the cymbals were the ones that made him lose a lot of his hearing in his right ear.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Drummers. Well, you said that you started off as a drummer, which helps for any guitarist to develop rhythm, because if you're a good drummer, then you're going to have a good sense of timing, which is what we need for rhythm and bass playing.
Yeah, and locking in. And honestly, I don't know if I'm getting worse at my timing or if I'm just more aware, or a combination of both. But I will say that now I notice it, maybe because I see things digitally, but it's not just that. I'll listen to it in my headphones and I'll be like, something's off there. It's not just as, and another thing too is music today is so locked into the grid and so edited and so perfect. Like heavy metal, for example, it's one of the things that I don't like now is that the production, they're doing exactly the same thing that the pop artists are doing. They're using all the same plugins. Everything is so slick, and they all sound generic. And it's like and I'm not blaming the bands, because the bands are like, there's some killer players out there right now.
It's just that it loses the soul. You talk about Jimi Hendrix. He was not always perfectly on time. He was kind of before the beat. I've watched a whole YouTube video about this and how B.B. King and Jimi Hendrix didn't follow the beat exactly as, say, Iron Maiden would, but that made their music kind of magical. That's the blues.
Well, and some of the reason that you almost want to see them live, right? And of course you can't now, but it's coming to me. I just can't remember his name. I can see his face. Wild T.
Oh, Wild T is Tony.
Yes,
I can't remember his last name, but I know his first name is
Tony.
Sorry,
Tony. I feel horrible. I can't. It's just not there. But if you get a chance to see him, because he's still gigging a lot, and I mean, he had some hits, on Much Music and stuff like that.
I have his first CD. It was a really good CD. I'd say he's a virtuoso player.
Yeah, ridiculous. I mean, if you see him live, that's where the magic is, because it's not all about being locked in and tight and perfect. It's about the moment. And some players, I'm not, one of my weaknesses, and I'm always working on it or trying to, but I'm never very good at it, is improvising. Like some people just...
That's so natural at it.
That's how they play. For me, I think what happens as somebody who, I have two excuses for that. One is growing up, like I said, doing shows where we were trying to be like, Motley Crue or Poison or Alice Cooper or something, where it was a theatrical show. You had, like, we were using pyro and stuff, and it was like, okay, here is your song, and it goes into the next song, and we're not a jam band, right? And even the solos, everything was played exactly or pretty close. And even the songs where we said, okay, we're going to let this solo go longer, I still ended up playing the same thing over and over and sort of perfecting it. And the other thing is, every time, because I've always wanted to write songs, is when I start playing, I stumble upon something and I go, oh, that sounds cool. And then instead of working on just keeping that flow, I automatically go into songwriter mode. Like, I wonder if this can be used for something. And And nowadays I grab my phone and have a little voice memo and
so we do the same thing.
Yeah.
I'll often put out my cell phone and I'll come up with a little riff, and I'll just record myself, and I'll listen to it 24 hours later. That night it might have sounded great, but 24 hours I'd say, what the hell is that?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've learned about doing that is, one, my guitars are not always in the same tuning, so that helps to know. I don't always say this is in E flat or something, but what I will do is if I'm playing something like instead of just running through, I'll play what I'm doing fast, but then I'll play it a little bit slower just so I can hear it and go, oh, okay, I can figure it out. Otherwise, it's just like I'm trying to relearn something ridiculous that I don't even know what I was doing. So that helps a little.
So why don't you give us a little bit of a demonstration?
So,
there's the importance of ear training. You can actually tune without any type of clip-on tuner.
Well, what I do often is I probably drive other people nuts, because when I'm playing, a lot of times I'm tuning like in the middle of songs and
really?
stuff. Yeah, just because it gets on my nerves when I hear things that are. I'm like the worst person, like I said, for improvising. So just like winging it is bizarre. Something that's cool though that I was working on. Is this rolling?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was working on for my new album, which is it was a kind of experiment with a pentatonic scale, because people go, pentatonic is like, anybody can do that, like 5 notes or whatever. But I'm trying to make it more interesting. So this one thing in G minor where it's like, actually, I'll try it this way. It's not really working. Hang on, I need maybe this.